chill. They're far from his best option, and I think that they're far from his worst. Maybe it will happen, but probably not. Pardon my nuance. Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Monday, May the 29th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and you can follow me on Twitter at Easton Freeze. I'm joined, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on Twitter at JT_Runke. JT, how's it going, man? Happy Memorial Day.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's Memorial Day, so I'm expecting even more people to listen, because what else are you going to do with your day off? You better listen on Memorial Day.
What do you do? Mowing the lawn? Throw the pot on.
There you go. Throw it on there.
Whatever you're getting ready for the cookout with the family, throw the pot on. You know what I mean? What else do you have to do? I'm with you 100%. A decent sports weekend. Number of things on the radar. NBA game last night. I don't know if you noticed that, but
I watched the last minute because I saw it was good, but that's
exciting.
All. That's the only part of an NBA game I'll tune into is the last minute. Just
you mean the part that
close.
matters? The important part? Right. Well, it was a very exciting game, and I sent you a meme this morning about the hater's guide to which you're a total NBA hater. So this is my guide. Is this your mentality? Yeah. Is this your mentality going in? Either you get to laugh because the Celtics came all the way back from down 0-3 to tie it up 3-3 and then lose at home, or you get to laugh at the Heat for being the first team in the history of the NBA to blow a 3-0 lead. Like, it's a win-win for you, right?
There you go. Yeah. You know me, it's just love being a hater. So
sure.
And then whoever wins, it doesn't matter, because let's bring on the Nugs. All hail Jokic. Let's get this going.
I am of the opinion that it doesn't matter who wins. They're just fighting for second place. I think the Nuggets are probably pretty stoked that this series has gone on as long as it has, because it looked like it was going to be over in a hurry and we were going to get a little early NBA Finals. No. 7 games, and the Nuggets are just getting rested and refueled and juiced up, ready to go, getting to study whoever they want to study to, it's shaping up to be the year for the Nuggets. And you know what? They're due. And Jokic is maybe the most entertaining, not often talked about star in sports right now to me. Like, he's just maybe the most unique star in sports, because he really, what's his comp historically speaking? He's just he's Jokic. He's just one of a kind. And he's super fun to root for because he's just a normal dude. He likes to ball. And then, he wins MVPs and they have to fly the MVPs over to freaking Slovakia or wherever he is from, because he's just chilling with the fam in the off season, like not doing movies or TV spots or commercials. He's just vibing and playing ball. So yeah, an interesting game to say the least. I don't know what the majority of people want to happen. Like, what do you think the average person that doesn't have a dog in the fight wants? They probably want to see the history, but at the same time, it's more fun to root for the underdog, and big dogs in this game now are the Heat. I don't know. I'll feel bad for the loser either way, just because that's my disposition. If Jimmy Butler, if this happens to him, he deserves better, frankly. And for the Celtics to come all the way back, I won't feel that bad for Boston sports because it's Boston, I guess. But it does kind of suck to get that close and not complete the historic run.
If it is the Heat, I just think it's funny. The only thing I'll say is that everybody for the past 5 years has been like, please not Cleveland or Golden State, please no more. Can we get anything else? And now you're getting something else, and everybody's like, we don't want this.
Well, not that though. Yeah, exactly. For a second, it was like, oh yeah, baby, Lakers, Celtics, can't wait for the finals. And the NBA probably has to be kicking themselves. Maybe they still get Boston, but if it's Nuggets Heat, it might be a ratings disaster. Another thing that went well in sports this weekend, Vandy baseball. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the SEC championship, or the SEC tournament rather. Championship game coming up next, and Vandy boys are going to be in that championship because they've gotten hot at the right time. Tim Corbin and the gang have looked really good. Beat Florida 11-6 yesterday. They were the 1 seed in the tourney. Vandy was the 4. Good for them. Vandy baseball continues to be just carrying Vandy sports, and you love to see it.
As it always is.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, then Vandy might really be in trouble. I saw an article talking about how these new mega conferences in college sports are considering like relegating different programs that don't pull their weight. And like, if Vandy baseball doesn't keep the ship just trucking along as long as Tim Corbin's around. I don't think that they can be shipped off. But yeah. The other thing that we can talk about from sports this weekend, I was made aware of this by Ari Merov over at My Sports Update on Twitter this weekend. We are this week at the midpoint of the NFL offseason. There have been 15 weekends without football that have passed, including this one. And we've got 15 more to go. So we do have the desert ahead of us, no doubt. The worst is yet to come, I'm afraid, my friends. We do have a little bit of OTAs left this week, then a little mandatory minicamp the next week, and then nothing until late July when they come back for camp. But we're halfway there. We made it this far. We can keep trucking along, and we'll keep trucking along with the show and get to the warm-up today, which is a peak late May, early June warm-up, JT. This is some awesome offseason content. Ross Tucker, who is a very successful sports media member, very successful podcaster. He has a whole podcast network that he does with the Ross Tucker Football Show. I think is what it's called, the Ross Tucker NFL Show, whatever it is. His primary show is very, very successful, very popular. He's got Greg Cosell, among others, on there all the time, and he does a great job with it. He, I guess, did some freelance writing with the 33rd Team, a relatively new publication, and he ranked the head coaches in the NFL, his head coach power rankings via Ross Tucker. Kind of made the rounds this weekend, and I figured it'd be something funny to look at and just kind of give our critiques on, JT. I don't know if you've really looked at this list at all. Have you?
I saw it in passing, but okay. I didn't.
It's an all right list. There's some things that I think are a little bit bonkers. For me, the number one thing is here's his top 10. Okay. We'll go through the top 10. Number 1, Andy Reid. Number 2, Bill Belichick. If you have those 1A, 1B, I'm good with either. That's the correct answer. Number 3, Tomlin. 4, Sean Payton. 5, Nick Sirianni. 6, Kyle Shanahan. 7, Sean McVay. 8, Brian Daboll. 9, Pete Carroll. 10, Doug Peterson. 2 of these things don't belong. 2 of these things do not belong. What are Nick Sirianni and Brian Daboll doing in the top 10 of this list?
I mean, yeah, when you have guys like Harbaugh and Vrabel and just a bunch of other guys outside of this list here, and you have those 2, it's a little bit of a head scratcher.
He's got a ring. Yep. I mean,
and it definitely is like recency bias, right? Like,
yes, Ron Rivera, he went to a Super Bowl one time. Like, really? We're gonna do this with these 2. Sirianni's the most egregious one.
Yeah, top 5. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna give the benefit of the doubt to Daboll because of what he was able to do with that team last year, and
it's only
forward.
1 year, but it's definitively it's impressive. Like what he did, he won Coach of the Year, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and deservingly so. Like that. I'm still not. I think it's one.
I find it very funny that Zach Taylor is ahead of Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Well, Zach Taylor at 12,
Zach
Mike
Taylor
Vrabel
at 12
at
is very interesting to me. And
if you told
Zach Taylor 10 spots ahead of Bills coach Sean McDermott also is a little interesting.
Eye popper. Sean McDermott at 22, behind the likes of Mike McCarthy, Brandon Staley, Arthur Smith, Dan Campbell. Kevin O'Connell, who's done 1 year with the Vikings, Mike McDaniel, like it's kind of blasphemous in my opinion for McDermott. If you'd told me Vrabel at 13 and given me no context, I'd have been like, okay, I mean, it's a little lower than I would have put him, but sure, whatever. But yeah, I don't know about Zach Taylor at 12, who like, I don't know. He's done when he's had crazy talented teams, they've been good, and when he's not, they've been bad. Like I don't know what he's brought.
I don't think they've.
I think he gets a coach.
Yeah, he's fine. I think he gets a little too overhated.
There's a little too much hate. I'm with you.
I think he does a fine job for what he's.
I don't think he's actively bad. I just think when I think of coaches in the NFL who you have to consider, like you're playing Team X on Sunday, and one of the first things that comes to your mind is who their coach is. Like, oh shoot, we're playing that guy. Zach Taylor is in the bottom 5 in the NFL for that. Like, you think Bengals, you think of 19 different things before you think, oh yeah, and Zach Taylor's the one calling the shots. No, man. But when you think Titans, you're like, no matter how bad you think the team may be, oh, but Mike Vrabel is still the coach over there. You know what I mean? Like, there's a number of coaches on this list like that. Like, I still think you play the Bills, no matter how hurt they are. It's like that coaching staff is still really talented, and they win a lot of games.
I was gonna say it'll be interesting, like, to see, like, come back to this list, because also, like,
yes,
it's like you put some of these guys up here on pedigree alone, and then other guys you leave out. Like Sean Payton at 4 is another one that I maybe have. Like, he's a great coach, but like
it's projection for sure.
It's total projection on this list, and like, he deserves to be in the top 10, but like
100% top 10.
4, like, after he hasn't coached in a while and he's going to the Broncos, I'm interested to see how he does there. He's a great coach, but it's a totally different system and new environment for him.
Really, the only thing that I like pound the table however is the Sirianni thing. Now, because here's my 2 cents on Sirianni. Like, he's had 2 good, successful winning years with the Eagles, yes, but so could you put I told you yesterday, a Deer Park water bottle could have coached those teams to 10 wins.
Yes.
1,000%. Like that was not impressive. Nick Sirianni, you didn't do anything. You were just there.
Yeah.
So it bothers me.
The last thing I'll say on it is that where I would rank Sean Payton number 1 overall is if they did a coaches ranking of coaches that like to get after it and have a good time.
If there was at the bar rankings.
I think my top 3 would have to be Sean Payton, McDaniel,
Mike McDaniel,
and then maybe. I don't know. Maybe
Sneaky Stefanski, who we saw a number of times out at the bars.
Yeah, Stefanski.
He flies under the radar.
Stefanski was there for it, so I think that would have to be the top 3 on that ranking.
But Peyton with there's a large gap between 1 and 2. It is.
Really is.
McDaniel still has his youth. You know, he's still young. He's still hip. Sean Payton, is he in his 60s now? Like, this dude's in his late 50s at least, and he's getting after it at the combine where we saw him every single day.
Yeah, he's 59.
Yeah, up at all hours of the day. We'd see him out at the bar at 2 a.m. and then the next day at 7 a.m. he'd be drinking a cup of coffee, looking like a spring chicken, like he got a really nice night's sleep. So I'm with you there. Let's move on to some Titans news and the primary topic of today's show, DeAndre Hopkins. Don't know if anybody noticed this over the weekend, but the Cardinals chose to cut or release DeAndre Hopkins from their roster. Not a post June 1st release either, JT.
It did. Yeah, it's a little head scratching, right? They said, we'll take our $6 million, be done with it, and see you later. And take the 22, 23-ish $million
22
dead
and change.
cap, I think. A little bit of a head scratcher move, but also that what Monty Austinfort is doing down there is just like in his first couple of months as the GM is just a little bit of a head scratcher.
So do you actually find it head scratching? Or because to me, it makes total sense when you understand what a post June 1st cut.
Yeah,
means.
I mean, of course, like
many folks found it head scratching, but I think it was a result of them not understanding how the post June 1st cut works, right?
Because you're going to have to owe, if you did post June 1st, you're going to have to owe him a lot of money in dead years past this year right now, which is the whole main thing. But still, it's like, I mean, to just let him go for free, I don't.
That part
know.
Can be head scratching, sure,
yeah,
sure. And I mean, it's head scratching less that they did it, and more that it tells us one very clear thing: they let him go because they could not find a trade partner. So it's less why they let him go, and more why was it so hard to was their asking price just way too high? You'd think that they'd lower their price all the way to the bargain basement before they just let him go for nothing. I mean,
yeah, I'm surprised. Like,
you'd rather get a 6th round pick in return than, but I guess
a hurt Julio got a 4th. I feel like you could have at least gotten a 4th round pick for DeAndre Hopkins somewhere.
Well, but then it was the contract, because if you trade him, you have to take that contract.
But now you can negotiate whatever kind of contract you'd like. So I mean, it is full tear down rebuild in Arizona with a quarterback on a contract that it's not like they're going to be in the market for next year's quarterback group, you would think.
I don't know.
But it's interesting to see what they're doing down there. However,
it is. Yeah.
I was going to say, segue into it, DeAndre Hopkins. Now, with him being released, it as we talked about in the Kickers episode, it is name value, banging on the table. We want that guy. We want that guy. We want that guy.
Bring me D-Hop.
But this one makes a little bit of sense, right?
Well, I think so, and let's talk about that in a minute. Before we do that, I want to lay out all the details, and just to explain, we kind of brushed over this and assumed everybody understood this. Just for those that maybe aren't aware of how the post June 1st cut works, when you cut a player post June 1st, or you designate them as a post June 1st cut, that is I believe the point in the calendar that is designated by the NFL. I don't know if there's much significance of it besides just what they've designated as the start-stop point of the kind of two phases of the free agency market. But if you designate a player to be cut post June 1st, not only do you get more cap money back, it's more cap relief in your pocket. So I'm making these numbers up right now, but if I had JT under contract and cut him pre-June 1st, I might get $7 million of cap relief. Whereas if I designate him as a post-June 1st cut, it might give me $14 or $15 million of cap relief. And that's, I guess, it's a reward for waiting to cut a guy at the point of the offseason where it's harder to replace them with a really high value name, right? Because by June 1st, you really don't have a whole lot of high value free agents on the market. You'd have to go trade for somebody of significant value most often. But what it also allows you to do is when you cut somebody post June 1st, the dead cap that is incurred by that contract being terminated early is split in half and spread out over the next 2 seasons. So, for example, the Titans cut Julio Jones in the offseason of before 2022 season, right? And they designate him as a post June 1st cut. His dead cap was somewhere in the territory of, I think, $10-ish million. And so they have incurred dead cap charges for Julio Jones this past season of about $5 million, I think. And this upcoming season, they're going to be on their books having about $5 million in dead cap attributed to Julio Jones's post June 1st cut. The reason you do that is because you want more cap space now. You want less dead cap. You want to spread out that hit over the next couple of seasons instead of one. The reason the Cardinals clearly chose not to do that and gobble up the full $22 million and change dead cap hit for Nuke Hopkins this season, is because this is a team that knows, the front office, the coaching staff, everybody there knows this is a rebuilding from the studs. I mean, we didn't remodel this house. We tore it to the foundation and we are starting over. And I think that part of that, like you mentioned earlier, it may include Kyler Murray may not be the future for this team. Like they may be looking to move him for a significant amount of capital and then just be the kings of the Dragons hoard of capital, which they kind of already are in the NFL right now, and go into the Caleb Williams, Drake May lottery next year. If they're going to be the number 1 overall pick, which not unlikely given the state of their roster, given the state of the state of their wide receiver room now without Nuke Hopkins, given the state of the quarterback situation. Is Kyler going to play it all this year? If so, is he going to look good? It's super not positive that's going to happen. Really not confident at all. Kind of confident of the opposite, actually. So that is the situation with him, and that's why they decided, let's just eat it all now. We don't need that cap hit in future years when we're trying to actually rebuild, trying to compete. We need as much room as possible. So that's why they chose to eat it all now instead of spread it over 2 years. Now let's talk about D-Hop and what is next for him, right? He is a free man now. He doesn't have to be traded. He doesn't have to have somebody else dictate the terms of where he lands. He gets to shop around, and he's going to be a very sought-after commodity because if you look at the current free agent wide receivers in the NFL, it is D-Hop and then a bunch of guys you've never heard of. That is the situation.
Well, that's not true. Hold on.
Okay. Well, what is the list? What is the list?
Kenny Galladay is on there.
Guys you don't want to hear about in relation to your team. If you hear Kenny Galladay and your team in the same sentence, run.
If we have to take the top 5 wide receiver free agents right now.
Okay.
DeAndre Hopkins.
Sure.
Kenny Galladay.
Sure.
Byron Pringle. Jarvis Landry. Okay. And N'Keal Harry.
An eclectic group. A really strong group of guys. I know who I'd want if you gave me the first overall pick. But with that situation, and there's a number of teams in the NFL, the Titans included, that really could use a receiver like DeAndre Hopkins. When we saw him last year, after his 6-game PED suspension to start the season, he looked like the dude that everyone wants to draft in fantasy, the dude that everybody loves to watch play football, the dude that everybody considers, at least in the past 5 or 6 years, one of the top 3 receivers in the NFL, and at this age now, he's getting up there into his 30s. There's questions as to whether or not the wheels are going to start to fall off for him as receivers of his ilk and quality, like Julio Jones, kind of fell off a cliff there around this same age. But the last season we saw of Julio in Atlanta, and JT, you know this as well as anybody, dramatically different than this past season with DeAndre Hopkins. Julio was looking like a guy where the wheels were clearly coming off. Hopkins didn't really show that last year at Arizona. He was that bona fide one. He demanded a significant number of targets. He played a lot and didn't deal with injuries. Now, he didn't play the whole season because of the PED suspension, but in the times that he did play, he was DeAndre Hopkins, right?
I mean, yeah, the narrative is, if you want the narrative to continue here, about how he misses so many games,
right?
It was mostly because of the PED suspension. However, he did still miss 2 games because of a hamstring injury
last season. Did he?
Last season, yeah. So he still battled. That
completely flew under my radar. I didn't know.
Yeah, it was the last 2 games of the season, I believe. Once they were out of it, they just said, right. we're done with it.
Now I remember those being kind of suspect. Maybe he.
Yeah, but I mean, still,
he would have played if they were in contention, but they clearly weren't. Yes.
In 6 or 9 games, he had 64 receptions on 96 targets for over 700 yards and only 3 touchdowns. So the touchdown production wasn't there.
Right.
But I mean,
the Cardinals didn't score many touchdowns last year.
Yeah, he was averaging.
That was most of them.
He was averaging 11 to 12 targets a game, like receptions. Like he was getting the ball crazy.
JT, you know that I know this because I drafted him in our fantasy league last year. Yes. Sat on him forever through his PED suspension, and then he was my primary receiver down the back stretch and was the reason that I was even remotely competitive down the stretch. Yep. So I think that wherever he lands, he's going to be an impact. Let's talk about potential landing spots, what the Titans might look like as a landing spot. And this is the tweet I sent out yesterday that is basically my feelings on the topic. I said, those of you who think the Titans make a ton of sense for DeAndre Hopkins, chill. Those of you who think DeAndre Hopkins makes absolutely no sense for the Titans, chill. They're far from his best option, and I think that they're far from his worst. Maybe it will happen, but probably not. Pardon my nuance. Like that is the take. That I'm sorry it's boring. I'm sorry that it's middle of the road. I'm sorry that it's not this polar, very opinionated, very strong take. But I think it's the correct take. And I think anybody with eyes and a shred of objectivity can look at this and say, yeah, they're a middle of the road option from DeAndre Hopkins' perspective as he chooses his next team. And not to veer too far off the DeAndre Hopkins subject here, but just a personal pet peeve of mine. I had somebody who I won't name on Twitter who I'm fond of, who follows me, and they are kind to me the majority of the time. And this wasn't unkind by any stretch of the imagination, but just kind of yanking my chain. And it brought up something that while they were joking, I was kind of serious about, saying, so they might get him, but probably not, but maybe. Hard-hitting analysis. They found that funny. And that is a funny way of parsing what I said. But I just said the analysis is that they're an all right landing spot from his perspective. Not great, not horrible. And it's not fence sitting on my part when the take is that the 2 polar opposite camps here are equally wrong. And my broader point in taking that more seriously than I should have. And again, he was yanking my chain and I got all riled up for no reason. My broader point is that this sentiment, and again, he was joking, but many don't joke about this. This sentiment is precisely what's wrong with sports media, in my opinion, JT. And it's this very mindset of fans that drives it. This idea that analysis can't be hard hitting, which is really code for good and entertaining, if it isn't super polar, super dramatic, super binary. Sometimes the best analysis is sort of boring. Sometimes it's not black or white. Sometimes it's this ugly gray color that you don't want, but it's the truth. It's the reality. And not to be that guy that's like, well, I'm smarter than everybody. All my takes are gray. Like, no, I present a number of very strong takes on this show. If you're familiar with the show, I go black and I go white when I feel strongly about something. But I'm also not of the ilk of, and JD, you and I have come across and we're familiar with, and we are often annoyed by a number of people in this very sports media market who are so inclined to be desperate for views and clicks and listeners and attention, that even when they look at something like this, and in their heart, they're like, yeah, it's an all right landing spot, but not the best. There's nothing special about Tennessee in this regard for DeAndre Hopkins, in my opinion. They still will contort their thinking or try to play devil's advocate to find a way to be all black or all white on the topic, because they know that that's what people care about. That's what people get upset about or excited about one way or another, and that's what drives the clicks. So that bothers me. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
But also on this take alone, it's like a little different because I haven't really seen a lot of people go into a hard yes or no on DeAndre Hopkins. It's been like
I've seen nothing but that from fans.
Really?
From fans. Well, now there's a number of analysts that I've seen say that. Although I'm expecting tomorrow, Monday morning, I can guarantee you we're going to get a number of radio station takes that are very black or white. I mean, just know that's
on the Friday when it came out, the initial reaction was like, yeah, but also like people were like shouting out like, I'd give it a 20, like a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 chance that he goes to the Titans, because I don't know, but it makes sense. Like that is
1 in 5 is strong. I don't know about
you
that,
think so?
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of teams that could use him. I mean, that's not too far off. If you made me put a number on it, made me put a percentage. I don't know, maybe a 10% chance that he comes. 1 in 10, maybe 15% chance, somewhere in there. So that's my take. And let's actually break down the pros and the cons. The reasons why Tennessee would be a decent spot and the reasons why it wouldn't. Glad I took that call. It was super important. It wasn't important. All right.
I could tell.
All right. So we're talking about the pros and the cons. Here we go. So the pros for why Tennessee would make sense for DeAndre Hopkins. Plenty of money to offer. And we'll get into the details of that here in a second. I'll kind of break down how they could structure his contract should they be interested in offering him a 1-year rental or a medium to long-term deal. So there's plenty of money if he's looking for a nice paycheck, which he has expressed interest in, by the way. He said wherever he goes, he wants, I think the quote is a nice contract, whatever that means. He in Tennessee would have coaches and teammates he knows and respects. So we know there's I think a couple of seasons in a row now, off seasons that is. Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins have done a lot of training together. So they're seemingly friends and spend a lot of time together in the offseason. And so that's one of the teammates that he'd be familiar with. And then on the coaching side, Mike Vrabel, he's familiar with from his time in Houston as the defensive coordinator when DeAndre Hopkins was there. And then Tim Kelly was his offensive coordinator through the years of Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins lighting the NFL on fire there for a little bit and running the AFC South. And from all accounts, he is very fond of Tim Kelly and has always been very fond of Tim Kelly. He also would be receiving infinity targets here in Tennessee. He would, if he goes to Buffalo, if he goes to, Cincinnati they would not be in the market for him, but like San Francisco or something like that, where they have a number of good receivers already on the team, proven receivers, he'd be having to share those reps. Now he might, if in Buffalo, he'd probably be sharing the 1 reps with Diggs. I'm guessing Diggs would probably command the wide receiver 1 reps, wide receiver 1 targets. In San Fran, it would kind of be the same. It'd be he and Debo probably commanding the 1s. So if he wants to be a true 1, a place like Tennessee, like he could be that true 1 in terms of target share, in terms of reps on the field, snaps on the field. And then it's a pretty comfy division. Like the AFC South on the uptick, in our opinions. I think it's going to be getting better in the coming years, especially if a number of these young quarterbacks start to hit. But for now, in terms of the AFC, at least, it is easily the best division to be in terms of ease. The cons are really easy. Like if he wants to go to a place where there are Super Bowl expectations immediately, that's not really the vibe here, right? Especially from a national. You got to think about DeAndre Hopkins looking at the teams from a national standpoint, because he's not in the nitty gritty in the local media of every team. He doesn't have inside knowledge on these teams that would give him a different opinion than most. Like he's going to be looking at what are the expectations for these teams. And for Tennessee, it's really widely varying, but very few are like, yeah, this is a contender to win it all this year right now. Right now, this team might be a contender for the playoffs, and it might be a contender for a top 10 pick next year, somewhere in there. Kind of a lot of volatility and unknown with this team, which is fair. The other con is if he wants to go to a place where they have an elite quarterback already. Ryan Tannehill is a guy that I defend a lot, and I think that the Titans have a good quarterback in Ryan Tannehill, and they may have a future elite quarterback in the young guys that they have, in particular Will Levis, if they develop. But that's a number of years down the road, you'd imagine. Right now, they just have a good quarterback situation with Ryan Tannehill. And then it is in the AFC. Like, I don't know if he cares or not about being in a really, really stacked AFC, but there's a lot of really, really talented quarterbacks over here, and the best teams and players and passers are all over here in the AFC. The NFC is kind of a dumpster fire. To a receiver looking to just be a stat god and be a huge attention draw and to potentially be the missing piece for a team that could make a run, it's significantly easier to make a run in the NFC right now than it is the AFC. You got to get through Dallas and the Eagles and San Fran and the Seahawks, end of list. Like, that's kind of all the people. The Lions, hey, the Lions, sneaky, right? Vikings, perhaps, but beyond that, it's not the Chiefs and the Bengals and the Bills and the Jaguars and the Chargers, and it's a nightmare over here. Okay, it's a nightmare. Don't come. Let's look into the money now before we talk about some other landing spots, because there are a number of landing spots that are, I mean, it's really Buffalo and Kansas City are the two that are talked most about. Which one of them in the arms race for the AFC is going to land DeAndre Hopkins? Because both could really use him right now, in my opinion. Not like the Titans could use him. I mean, the Titans could really use him. Both those teams could really use him. And shout out our guy, Zach Lyons at FWordsPod on Twitter for some of this information. But the Titans do have the money right now. They have the cap space to sign Hopkins to a multi-year deal or to a 1-year rental situation deal. If it is going to be a 1 or 2 year deal, a rental kind of vibe, they really kind of have two options. They can either mess with the current contracts that they have on the books right now in the form of cuts and trades and restructures, things of that nature, or they can do what the Ravens did with OBJ this past month, right around the draft, when they go and get OBJ and they add a bunch of void years with a signing bonus. It was a very, very funny money contract when it came down. Very strange. The Titans could easily do that with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins as well. You just kind of run the risk of a much bigger financial hit down the road because of all those funny money numbers added onto the back end of the contract. If the Titans choose to do a multi-year deal, here's kind of the situation. And our guy, another friend of the show, Mike Herndon at Mike Herndon NFL on Twitter, has a really fantastic thread on this. The Titans have $10.6 million in current cap space right now per overthecap.com. And once you take out the expected cap charges for Skoronski and Levis, that's going to be around $6.8 million left over. So that's the effective cap money they have right now, which, again, effective cap space is different than simple restructure cap space and maximum restructure cap space. Both of those things can easily be found with a toggle tool on Over the Cap. So if you want to go and look, the effective cap space of each team, or in other words, the cap space they have right now, technically, without doing restructures, is not really helpful. And JT, I think the more we get into NFL media, the more this becomes apparent. Like, that number doesn't really mean much of anything because of just how much easy money there is sitting in restructures on your team if you choose to go and make money by extending or changing the contract language, the nature of existing guys on the team. And we saw Ryan Tannehill create magic money to suddenly be able to pay for Julio Jones. We've seen Derrick Henry do it. We've seen a number of guys. I mean, on the team right now, Kevin Byard could be a contract like that. Derrick Henry could be. Ryan Tannehill could be. Harold Landry could be. I mean, I think he's one of the easiest contracts right now that you could just push that money down the road and give the Titans a lot of room there. But if the Titans do want to sign him, they wouldn't have to redo any of their existing contracts right now. They would not have to if they choose to do a 1-year deal around the $8 million range. They could do something like that with incentives that would take him up to the $12 to $15 million maximum salary, depending on how his season goes, and add a couple of void years at the end of that contract, making his cap hit for this season roughly $4 million, which is within their budget. They could also just restructure a deal like Harold Landry's, like I mentioned, and spread those cap charges out over 2024, 25, 26 on down the road so that they don't have to use up really all of their effective cap space right now on a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. They could still have some at their disposal. This is something that would really make sense for them, I think. And Mike Herndon points this out on his thread that like the Titans have roughly $10 bajillion in cap space next season and for the seasons going forward. So to push money on a guy like Harold Landry's contract down the road, who coming off of a bad injury, but very young, very talented player, you're expecting him to be, with the contract he's on right now, the idea is he's going to be a stalwart piece of this team for the foreseeable future. So pushing his money down the road, not all that risky, in my opinion, and something that wouldn't be all that harmful to, again, the $100 bajillion worth of cap space you have in the coming seasons. The actual number right now, I think, is like $97 to $100 million in effective cap space for next year, which is absurd. So that small restructure would be just a drop in the bucket for them in future years. It would also be pretty easy for them to make a deal from a cap space standpoint that, like we mentioned from Zach Lyon's tweet, would be like a 1-year rental if they choose to do that. So, the opposite of what we mentioned in Zach Lyon's article or tweet, doing a multi-year deal if they choose to do that, because with a multi-year deal, the first year or usually 2 or 3, the cap hits are so low because of the way you're able to maneuver the cap. The risk there obviously is that you're going to be like Arizona right now, having to eat a $20 million cap charge if D-Hop does in fact fall off a cliff at the age of 34 or 35, which is reasonable to assume. So that is the risk you run, but they could do a multi-year deal and push those numbers down the road. All of that being said, what you didn't hear in any of that, JT, was the Titans having to sacrifice or choose between DeAndre Hopkins, should he ever even be interested in coming to Tennessee, and a veteran big number guy already on their books. And the one you see thrown around a ton right now is Kevin Byard. If you hypothetical Titans fans, okay, hypothetical. If you had to give up Kevin Byard for DeAndre Hopkins, do you pull the trigger? If you're Rand Carthen, let's first of all, the pick me boys out there that are desperate for attention with these hypotheticals every single time a known commodity becomes available. I mean, this is what we are constantly laughing at, but it's so dumb. Stop with the hypotheticals. Stop playing fake GM. Do it on occasion in moderation, but when you do it twice a week, every single week through May and June and July, please, we're begging you to stop. Nobody cares. That was mean, but it's true. What is interesting about this mentality is just how much people don't understand the cap and the situation with Kevin Byard. People see the headlines on Kevin Byard, JT, and I think that the thinking is, well, they've asked him to take a pay cut and he said no, so he's just going to be on that number. No, man, that's not. They asked him to take a pay cut because that was one of a number of options for how they could change the number. But right now he's on the books for like $19 to $20 million against the cap as an aging safety. We've talked about this. I can't count how many times. You can't have that on the books for a guy like that. You can, however, restructure his contract. You could cut him. You could designate him as a post-June 1st cut. You could try to trade him. There's a number of options to change that number. I think the one that the Titans are going to be ultimately engaging in is restructuring in some form or fashion. I refuse to believe they're going to let him play on this contract as it stands in 2023. And I also kind of refuse to believe that they're interested. Well, I know they're not interested in cutting him. They could cut him, but it would be an all-time stupid move. I also don't think they're interested in trading him. Like I don't see a trade market there, and I don't think they have any interest in doing that. So the idea that they would have to do that for a guy like D-Hop, dumb, wrong and dumb, bad combo. It's not correct. So if anybody tells you that, maybe don't listen to them because they don't know what they're talking about. Let's look into some of the insight from a national media perspective as to what DeAndre Hopkins actually wants and what the swirling news around the situation is. So from Albert Breer over at Sports Illustrated, he tweeted this on Saturday of this weekend. The Chiefs and the Bills were the only teams to have substantive trade talks with Arizona, which when I read that, JT, it made me think of, remember we were sitting there pre-draft night one, and the news about the Titans and Stroud is running like just rampant wildfire through our Twitter timelines. And then thrown in there is like, hey, by the way, it might include a package deal for DeAndre Hopkins. And it's like, what? Where'd that come from? That was a crock of nonsense. That was all. That was a lie. What's the like Tales from the Crypt? It was a fabrication. It was a lie. We made it up. You know what I mean? That meme. That was the deal, I guess. It was just the Chiefs and the Bills looking to potentially trade for him pre-draft. with Kansas City in particular, the issue was the contract, and it was really the issue with Buffalo as well, as reported by Breer, that it was the contract, like we mentioned earlier, that was keeping them from pulling the trigger on that trade. Kansas City apparently made progress, but the OBJ deal with a $15 million base more or less blew that progress up because it kind of reset the trade market with OBJ getting that money. Now DeAndre Hopkins is using that kind of as a floor, as he should. As for where this goes next, according to Breer, he says that I would say the price is going to dictate that. Under the current circumstances, it's unlikely that Kansas City or Buffalo go and get him. If his price tag comes down, both teams offered incentive-heavy deals, for example, then maybe. Both Kansas City and Buffalo talked directly to Hopkins and already like him. So let's look at the actual space that these teams have. And these were the five teams listed by DeAndre Hopkins as his wish list when it was considered a potential trade for him to get out of Arizona and not being released. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chargers. Okay, the Chiefs have basically 0 wide receivers right now and $1 million in cap space, but some room with restructures that they could easily make with simple restructures, get enough money to get him if they want, but that's not really their MO. It's very actually anti their MO. With the Bills, they have one outside receiver and $1 million in cap space as well, but they have simple restructure room should they choose to do that. The Eagles have 2 star receivers, in AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. I don't really see them going after DeAndre Hopkins, but if they did, that'd be kind of broken. They have $13 million in effective cap space right now. The Ravens have 3 wide receivers already, but none of them all that well. OBJ, but outside of that, not great guys right now. Some promising young guys, be sure. And $11 million in cap space. And then the Chargers have 3 receivers already. Although I don't know if you've noticed, JT, the kind of the swirlings around that wide receiver room. Maybe they just have 2.
I've been looking at that as I gear up for fantasy deep diving and discussion. I've been watching that wide receiver room in Los Angeles.
Kind of suspect.
It's a little
suspect, and actually makes some more sense as to why the Chargers did what they did in the draft. But that's a topic for another day. And they have some significant space right now, but a guy named Justin Herbert needs to be re-signed this offseason, and he's going to be, and that's going to dictate a lot of money. So a lot of uncertainty there. All of that is to say, some of his top options don't have what the Titans have, in the sense that they can throw money at this guy now. They've got the money to do it. They got the money not only to do it now, but that it still makes sense for them down the road, unlike some of these other teams who would do it now and it'd be a significant risk for them. So all of that to be said, and I feel like we've laid out all of the details here for folks to come to their own conclusion. My conclusion, JT, is still, I don't think he's going to come to Tennessee, but it wouldn't blow my mind if he did. There's a lot of things to like. There's a lot of things to dislike. It all depends on what he wants. We don't know. How does he prioritize the highest possible contract versus the quarterback situation versus the target share situation versus the competitiveness of the team situation versus the how much do I like the coaches there situation? All of these things, you could argue, you could tell me he cares most about one of these things, and you could do all 5, and I'd be like, okay, I believe you that's what matters most to him. We don't know what matters most to him. So if the things the Titans can offer matter most, then maybe he'll consider them. If what matters most to him is an elite quarterback and championship window now, it ain't going to happen. I'll reserve for now the analysis as to whether or not it would be a good idea for the Titans, which I think we both have opinions on. But because it's such an unlikeliness, in my opinion, and if it is going to happen, maybe not anytime soon, we'll put that off until the day it happens. We'll cross that bridge when it gets there. So
if you had to name your top 3 most likely landing spots for him right now.
Oh man. I'd say Buffalo is up there because I think they have a desperation element to them. See, it's tough. Like there's not any.
I think I have my 3. I've been, as you've been discussing it. I think I have my 3.
Another team that kind of comes to mind for me that I don't think would make the craziest sense in the world. Could you see a reunion with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland?
I thought about it. It's probably like in my top 5. It's probably like number 5. But
so who are your 3?
So my 3 would be number 1. I think the Detroit Lions make a lot of sense.
I should have thought, yes, that makes especially with Jameson Williams missing some games. Yes, yep.
I mean, currently their top two outside guys are what is his name? I'm even blanking on his name. One is Marvin Jones. One is Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones are their two top outside guys right now.
Elite. Yeah.
And then behind that, I mean,
they have a ton of cap space, right?
They are number 4 right now with top 51 cap space of $23 million. So they could throw him a $14 to $16 million deal right now if they wanted to, without having to do any restructuring or anything like that.
All depends on what his opinion of Jared Goff is, baby. It's all that matters.
Number 2, which I think is all 3 of these are just like not flashy, like very much boring teams that he could
teams that if he lands there, NFL Network's going to be kind of bummed.
Yeah. The other one that I think could be very interesting is the New York Giants. They have
Lord knows they could use them in that room.
Currently with a starting 5 of Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, and Sterling Shepard, and Wan'Dale Robinson.
6 slot receivers.
They could use some size over there. The money is not as great as some of these other teams. Looking at them, they're 25th with only $4.6 million available in the top 51. So they'd have to make some restructures or do something about that, but would be a receiver that would make an impact there for sure.
It would change the calculus with that receiving room dramatically.
Yeah. And then the final one that I think makes a lot of sense, and it's been one that has been talked about for maybe a year and a half now, is the New England Patriots. I mean, they do not have anything.
The Patriots right now, dude? They are the black hole of the league right now. They're the most boring team in the league, in my opinion. Their
top 3 wide receivers right now are Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster.
Juju, baby. I keep thinking Juju went there. And Juju said, give me the bag.
Yep. And then they drafted 2 rookies that were 2 of our rookies that we said were the worst out of this wide receiver class, in Demario Douglas and Kayshon Boutte. So not exactly sure what they are doing.
Can name a more boring team in the league right now to you than the Patriots? I don't think there is one for me. I'm bored by the Patriots.
The Bucks are pretty boring. I mean,
yeah, but boring in a good way. Like actually bottoming out. Like I expect the Patriots to win some games this year.
True,
not nearly enough for it to matter.
They'll be a very boring 7-9 team.
They are driving the purgatory bus right now. They are driving the purgatory bus until further notice. So yeah, those are our thoughts on those guys, and DeAndre Hopkins, where he goes. Here, last question I'll ask JT. What's the over-under on date by which he has a landing spot? If I told you over-under, he lands somewhere by June 24th, you saying before or after then we know where DeAndre Hopkins is playing football this year?
I would probably say after.
I think so.
I feel like this is
time.
I think he's going to take his time, and we probably get it a week or 2 before training camp starts.
Right. Do a little OBJ college scouting style tour. Do trips to all them. Let them just lavish you with steak dinners and night fancy bubbling water in the lobby.
And that's what we will be talking about. We'll say DeAndre Hopkins spotted with so-and-so coach at
our plane tracking source has DeAndre Hopkins' jet landing at Brentwood B&A. Yeah, 1,000%. All right, let's move on. We got 2 more little topics here in the Titans news before we get out of here.
Yeah, this is a situation that has just come across like my timeline today.
It's weird.
Something that is very interesting, but Jimmy G is not maybe the quarterback of the...
Sit down for this news. Jimmy G's hurt. It's going to blow your mind.
Wow, that's crazy.
Take a seat.
So you probably know more about what's going on, but currently he isn't exactly slated to be. There's a possibility that they signed him and he is not their starting quarterback this season.
Yeah. So he had this is from the article from ProFootballTalk.com, and it says that because of a pre-existing medical this is technical jargon I guess I'm not familiar with. Because of a pre-existing medial and middle cuneiform and fracture of the base of the second metatarsal in the player's left foot, and the club will not this is weird context quote, and that the club would not enter into an NFL player contract with said player. I guess that's contract jargon, but it's the injury he suffered during the 2022 season. that allowed for Brock Purdy to come in and become the cult of Brock Purdy. And then went on to talk about it acknowledges and waives the risk of further injury. This is how his contract was changed, by the way. So I should take a step back. When he failed his physical, which is what all this revolves around, Jimmy G had a physical late May, I think, late this month, failed it. This prompted the Raiders to then go take his contract and restructure it dramatically to include a lot of outs for them should he not be able to play this year, because he's owed a lot of money. They gave him a good contract for a guy like Jimmy G this offseason, and he's really their only option. I forget who was the guy that played for them like one game last year and was kind of electric for 10 seconds.
Stidham, I think it's
Stidham. Jared
Is it?
Stidham. Yes, the guy that was going to be the heir apparent to Tom Brady and then definitely wasn't the heir apparent to Tom Brady.
Yes.
They changed it in the language in the new contract. It waives the risk of further injury, including potential, quote, permanent disability by continuing his career. Player also understands that such condition has decreased his ability to play professional football, the waiver states, and that continuing to play professional football may result in deterioration, aggravation, or re-injury of the existing conditions, rendering player physically unable to perform the services that would be required of player by an NFL player contract. Blah, 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 mumbo jumbo.
Yes.
What it tells us is that Jimmy G is made of glass, as we already knew. And it's a question mark as to whether or not he's going to play. Now, this has been taken by every fan or media member in Titan circles that is desperate to ship off Ryan Tannehill before this season. And they have they're crossed county lines. They're a state over at this point running with this story because they are desperate for potential spots for the Titans in the next 2 or 3 months to trade away Ryan Tannehill. And I guess get the ball rolling on the Will Levis train. To them, I say, don't waste your time all summer looking for these spots. Is it possible Ryan Tannehill is traded before the season? Yeah, it's possible. I'd give it like a 3% chance. And if it does happen, it's going to be because a guy like this simply cannot play ball. But I think that this is a little bit peak May content. That's kind of what it reads to me, JT. A story that when we get to camp, Jimmy G is going to be out there and be fine. And it's going to be like, oh, okay, so it wasn't a big deal. Mike Florio, who I like more than most, actually, tends to sensationalize, and that's what makes him entertaining. But this kind of comes across as sensationalizing, a little bit of tinfoil hatty, looking for a little conspiracy in May to get the juices pumping on the timeline. I kind of think this is all going to be a nothing burger, and the team clearly wants him or they wouldn't have signed him. They'd like for him to be healthy and ready to play football. Obviously, Jimmy G would be liking to be ready to be football ready in camp and at least by week 1. So I don't think they're, and also I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't see the Raiders as a team that would love a Ryan Tannehill. I kind of see Jimmy G as more fitting that McDaniel vibe than Ryan Tannehill, but I guess I could be wrong. All of that is to say, I think Ryan Tannehill is playing for this team this year, like 97% chance, and I think you shouldn't waste your time and energy.
So we've gone from early January that you are now 99.5% sure Tannehill is the starting quarterback to 97%. That's the big caveat.
It is. That's the headline. That's gonna be the title of today's show. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Easton Freeze loses 2% confidence in Titans starting quarterback.
Dramatic shift.
Yeah. Last thing here for today, and this is like the most
speaking of peak May content.
Peak May content. The Titans continue to use Kevin Byard in promotional material. Yes, for what it's worth. So,
which, to be fair, JT, of all of the nothing burger reading the tea leaves things that like fall into this category, which we do a lot of in sports, I do think that promotional materials are sneaky, reliable indicators of where a team's head is, because we have seen teams in very suspect fashion leave out guys really early on before it was ever like the first domino to fall for people to be talking about how like this guy might be gone is, the team put out these big like 50-foot banners out front of the stadium and they included this guy instead of this guy. And you're like, huh, really? That's kind of strange. You know what I mean? So for them to continue to use Kevin Byard, and it was an Instagram sponsorship, a sponsored ad across my Instagram feed this morning of Kevin Byard blown up. It's not Kevin Byard was included. It was just Kevin Byard. in this Fireball Fast Pass, which, by the way, it's
can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah, it's
quite
Fireball
a deal.
Fast Pass, all 9 home games for $400, including a ticket. I mean, they say including the London game, including a Ravens ticket. Not sure how that works, but if you look into it, JT, it's all for AA through ZZ seats. I think it's flex nosebleed seating. Like that, you don't find out. Like they basically put you in a seat at the last minute that they haven't been able to fill, and you go sit there and you watch.
Yes, that's exactly how it works. Yes.
Okay, it's a get in the building ticket. You know better than I, because you've worked with these things before.
Yes, that's basically what it is. And their ticket, like when you scan, it just says Fireball. And like, it doesn't even say anything else on it. And it's like, it's one of those.
Is it like the food stamps of tickets? It's kind of the food stamp of tickets, right?
Kind of. I wouldn't go. I don't want to demean these people because of course they're getting to go to a game. But like,
I mean, listen, I get it. I'm young and poor. Like I'm blessed to be able to go to the games on the dime of yes. I'm able to go to these Titans game on the dime of the team as media. So like, I'm not. If I was paying for tickets and I just wanted to get in the building. $400 for 9 games.
$44 for a ticket that includes maybe a London ticket. I don't know how that works, but like that's not terrible.
There too. How does that work?
How does that work?
JT, have you been to the upper corner deck of the Titans Stadium before? Because I have. And I know it. Is it worth $44? I mean, it is a nosebleed of all nosebleeds, man. You're just in the building.
There are better nosebleeds in stadiums. I will say that. I've not
been in a ton of stadiums, but I've never been in a nosebleed that bad. Maybe those weird seats in Lucas Oil Stadium that we found when we were there that are kind of strange.
Maybe that's worse.
But if you're considering this, just know going into it that this is a get in the building ticket. This is not a ticket that you're going to enjoy from your seats. Any weather that day is going to be maximized tenfold up there. Any wind, tenfold. Exposure to the sun and the rain and the wind and the elements. And also, you're going to get 300 times the viewing experience from your television than you are, as long as you're rocking a flat screen of some sort and it is not an old box TV, you're going to enjoy that picture better than your view from up there. But if you just want to get in the building and be there for the vibes, be there for the support, by all means, go for it. And with that ends a pretty scuffed show, the DeAndre Hopkins show. I have to apologize, by the way, for lying about this show on Friday. We were going to have a guest today, Sean Calderon, who you're familiar with if you read any of the Titans media article circuit stuff. He does a lot of that for a number of different organizations, worked with Broadway for a while. He's with other publications now, but does a really good job. And he wrote an article on Will Levis last week that I found really interesting. He did kind of a deep dive into his circumstance as compared to the other quarterbacks drafted in this class to try to find a way to artificially put them on level ground. And I thought it was interesting and would maybe open the eyes of a number of fans. I decided to kind of put that off, not for long, but I felt like it would fit in better in our Will Levis deep dive episode, which will be in June. All of our deep dives into each of the players that were added as rookies will be this June. And so we'll talk about that with him then. We do have one more guest later this week that I'm for sure is going to happen, barring some underlying circumstance. We'll be talking with him, maybe a full episode later this week after OTAs. The one thing to look forward to this week, JT, is we will have a Wednesday episode. We'll have 3 episodes this week. Our Wednesday show will be coming off of the heels of OTAs, which media will be back at on Wednesday. We'll be there for the same deal, starting from, I think, 11 to 3. We'll talk to a couple of the position coaches before we watch practice. We will watch practice. If you have any player in particular that you'd like me to pay attention to and give some notes on, feel free to DM me, tweet at me. Let us know in the reviews that you leave for this show. Nice little segue there. Call me a pro. We do need you guys to go and give us a 5-star rating and a review. Write in the review whatever you want, including some instructions for me. Let me be the voice of the people. Let me be your eyes and ears at camp. Let me know what you'd like to go see, and I will go and see it and report back to you as much as I can. And we appreciate all of you listening. We appreciate all of you who give us 5-star reviews. It's very helpful to us in the algorithm. All of those things that go over your heads and, frankly, ours, but we know it's important. Until then, JT, we'll be back on Wednesday afternoon talking OTAs. For producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a great Memorial Day today, and we will talk to you later this week.